All right, so these are called multiplying and dividing rational expressions. It's basically just a bunch of factoring and then canceling out the anything that you can. Now, I chose two of the more challenging ones that you will see. So the first one you actually have on your assignment, you're just going to be able to cross cancel as you see fit. But what I want you to notice on this one, because they do progressively get more and more complicated, you've got a 5x in the numerator here. And then down in the denominator, you have a trinomial. Right away, I see that there's a GCF of an x. So I'm going to factor out that GCF, and then I'm going to do our x factoring to see if I can get to parentheses for that trinomial. Up here in my numerator, I can readily identify a 4 as my GCF, so I'm going to factor that out, and then I'm going to do my x factoring to get to parentheses, and then I've got my 20 in the denominator. At that point, I will be able to start canceling. Remember, you can't cancel if these things are being attached with a plus or a minus sign. So you can't just start crossing things off at that point. But anything that's being multiplied, you are able to cancel. So I would keep this 5x in the numerator, and I would go ahead and factor an x out of this denominator, leaving me 2x squared minus 17. This should have a squared by it, sorry, 17x, and then minus a 9. I'm going to go ahead and factor a 4, which is my GCF, out of this numerator, and I would have x squared minus 5x minus 4 going to 14 3 times with a 2 left, 4 going to 24 6 times. And all of that is over 20. At this point, when I see this trinomial, I recognize I'm going to more than likely factor it. So keep in mind when your lead coefficient is 2, I do this x factoring down here. I take a times c to get negative 18 for my top number. I take a negative 17, which is my b for the bottom number. And if you remember, I'm trying to find two numbers that will multiply to give me negative 18, at the same time add or subtract to give me negative 17. Well, since the difference is 1, I know it's going to be an 18 times a 1. 18 times 1 is 18. The way I get that a negative is to put a negative sign with one of these. The only way that this middle term is going to be negative is if my bigger number is negative. So when I take and multiply negative 18 times 1, I get negative 18. When I take and add negative 18 plus 1, I get negative 17. Because this lead coefficient is a 2, I cannot just write my 2 parentheses. I've got to split the middle and then factor by grouping. So I'm going to keep this 2x squared here as my first term, but I'm now going to split this negative 17x into a negative 18x plus a 1x. So subtract 18x, add 1x, and then keep that last term of a negative 9. I put my 2 parentheses, and I look for GCFs within those parentheses. So we're factoring by grouping here. I can take out a 2x from this first parenthesis, and I'm left with x minus 9. And unfortunately, there's not anything I can factor out of a 1x and a negative 9. So I'm just going to put a plus 1 right there because nothing's changing. And I leave the x minus 9. I don't know if I just said plus 9 or not, but and it worked. I've got my x minus 9 right there. So now I pull that out, and I've got x minus 9 as my common factor, and I put my leftovers, which would be the 2x plus 1. So I am going to rewrite this denominator. Now I know teachers a lot of times rewrite the problem so you don't get confused. This to me is not terribly confusing if I just draw one line through it and I put my x here and I put my x minus 9 and my 2x plus 1. That to me saves rewriting the entire problem, and it's pretty straightforward. I can still see my numerator's 5x. This is my new denominator. Over here, I'm going to have to factor this as well. The good news is this has a lead coefficient of 1. So as soon as I do my factoring, I can immediately put those in the 2 parentheses since the lead coefficient is a 1. So my x here, a times c, goes at the top, and that would be 1 times negative 36. The b goes at the bottom, which is a negative 5. And I think 9 times 4 will give me 36. In order to make that a negative, I know one of these numbers has to be negative. Since I know the middle term is a negative, I put that negative sign with the bigger number. So negative 9 times 4 is negative 36, but negative 9 plus 4 gives me negative 5. So this, fortunately, and again, I know rewriting it's a big deal, but I just cross it off and then put my 2 parentheses right here. I feel like it's still pretty straightforward. Since the lead coefficient was 1, I can go straight to x minus 9, x plus 4. And now I'm looking at this numerator, this denominator, and I'm just going to see what all will cancel. So I've got a 5 up here. 5 divided by 5 is 1, but 20 divided by 5 is 4. I have an x up at the top of the fraction, and I have an x down at the bottom of the fraction. X divided by x is just going to give me 1, so those can cancel out. I have an x minus 4 right here, or x minus 9, and an x minus 9, which will cancel, leaving me with a 1. And I think that's all I've got left. So, to cancel anyway. So it looks to me like numerator here turned into a 1. Numerator here, I had a 4 and an x plus 4. Oh, no, look, I missed one of them. Haha. The 4 and the 4 will also cancel because you've got a 4 in the numerator and a 4 in the denominator. So sorry about that. So even better, x plus 4 in the numerator. And looks like in the denominator, this all canceled, and just a 2x plus 1. So I did choose this. It's at the bottom of the page. It's one of the longer ones, but I wanted to make sure that you're always looking to see factor into the parentheses so you get a multiplication problem, and then you can cancel your parentheses. Make sure those parentheses are identical so that, you know, an x plus 4 does not cancel with an x minus 4. X plus 4 must cancel with an x plus 4. Now, this one is going to work the same way, but it's a division problem. Good news is, you all know that dividing fractions just means keep, change, flip, or multiply by the reciprocal, which is the math terminology, I suppose. I do rewrite this, actually it's the first time I write the problem, so this is what you're going to see in the textbook. I will rewrite this with a multiplication sign and the reciprocal. Then I will start factoring. So I've got, and I'm going to leave a little room because I'm just going to draw lines as I factor these. A squared plus 3a minus 10. There is not a GCF I could have taken out. And a squared plus 6a minus 7. Now keep in mind, I can't cancel as it is because there are pluses and minuses attached there. Multiply this. I am flipping this. So I'm going to go ahead and factor a 3 as my GCF here. And take that out, and I'm left with a squared plus 6a minus 7. Now, remember, this does not disappear. We are not solving these equations, and 3 does not equal 0, so it drops out. We are just simplifying. So you have to make sure you keep this 3 out in front of your parenthesis. If you were to distribute it back, we would get what we originally started with. Now I'm going to GCF this. I see an a squared will come out and a 9. So I'm going to take out a 9a squared. When I divide this first term, 9a squared, I have an a left over. And when I divide the second term, 9a squared, I just have a minus 9 left. Nice thing about these 3 trinomials, if you recognize here, here, and here, my lead coefficient is 1 in each of them. So after I do that x factoring, I can go straight to the 2 parentheses, which makes it a little bit shorter. So if I'll do my first x right here. A times c is going to give me a negative 10, and my b coming straight down is a 3. Well, negative 10 is going to be 5 times 2. 5 times 2 is 10, but in order to get that negative sign, I need this middle term to be positive, so I'm going to put the negative sign with the smaller number. So if I double check, 5 times negative 2 is negative 10, 5 minus 2 is 3. I can go straight to my 2 parentheses since my lead coefficient is 1. A plus 5, and a minus 2. Cross that off. I've got my numerator rewritten. Doing the denominator, and I do my x factoring here. A times c is a negative 7. My b is a 6. Factors of 7 is 7 times 1, 7 and 1. The only way to get a negative when I multiply, but a positive when I add, is to put the negative with the smaller number. So 7 times negative 1 is a negative 7. 7 plus a negative 1 is 6. Lead coefficient is 1, so I can go straight to my parentheses. A plus 7 and a minus 1. Cross off the original because I've rewritten it in factored form. Last one here that I'm going to need to factor, draw my x. A times c is a negative 7. This looks really familiar. B is a positive 6. Same factoring because it's identical to what I just factored. And I will have 3 out in front, a plus 7 and a minus 1. Cross off because I've factored it. The a minus 1 cancels because those parentheses are identical. The a plus 7 cancels because those parentheses are identical. I don't know. Of course. Nobody spoke up when I did that factoring wrong. If I took a 9 out of here, this would be a 2. Good thing. We're still working this. A minus 2, a minus 2. Woohoo! Those cancel. And my 3 will cancel with my 9, leaving me with a 3 in the denominator. And it looks to me as I look at my numerator, everything has been crossed off except the a plus 5. And everything has been crossed off in the denominator except my 3a squared. Probably gave you all a heart attack earlier in the video when I didn't factor that wrong. Right, I'm so sorry. But if you were paying attention, you did catch that. So here is the final answer in reduced form. Frequently, these are going to cancel nice like this, and you're just going to have maybe one thing left in the numerator, a little left in the denominator. Occasionally, they're going to leave a couple things in the numerator, a couple things in the denominator. But look at factoring. This is a lot of factoring here in this lesson. So you've got, like I said, 6 problems. They are on page 806. and you will do 6, 8, 10, 14, 16, 18. Remember to take a picture and email that picture to me so that I can give you credit for all of this learning that's happening. If you have any trouble, email me and I will happily give you help if you need it.